Thank you for listening to Offline and Unfiltered. We are your hosts, Lakisha and Megan.
On this podcast, we bring you unfiltered conversations on business and culture through listener stories, expert interviews, and a little bit of shit talking. Hello, listeners. Welcome to today's episode of Offline and Unfiltered. As always, joined by Lakisha today. We have a fun one today. We are going to do a little bit of scrolling through antiwork on Reddit, and I have pulled out a couple of fun little nuggets and posts that I am going to read to Lakisha and have her respond to, as in, if she thinks it's even true, what's her take on it? And what advice would she give the person that's posting in this scenario? So I think it'll be a fun one, a little spicy, a little different for us, a couple different topics today. Lakisha, I would love to hear about your relationship with Reddit. Are you a Redditor? Do you spend time on Reddit?
I peruse every blue moon, but I see a lot of people are addicted to it, and I just don't fancy it. I think the ability to determine what's true and what's not, it's just not a place I would call home.
Yeah, so pretty funny. I'm kind of like the opposite. I wouldn't say I'm addicted to Reddit. It's definitely, I think, my highest used app on my phone, though. I love Reddit because I think it's like the purest form of human behavior, because it's the last social media that's like truly anonymous. So you see all kinds of shades of people, in like the most positive to the most negative. I think some Reddit communities can be like a really special, like sacred place, and build community and meet interesting people and share interesting stories. And I think other communities are like super toxic and angry. And I will lose hours just reading how people react to different things. I have to be careful because there's a lot of HR hate on Reddit. So I actually personally do not subscribe to anti-work for the sake of my mental health. I think I need at least some space in my life that I'm not thinking about work or business or the podcast or anything else. It's hard, but I try to make Reddit one of those spaces. But I thought that this would be a fun exercise, and curious to see, Lakisha, your takes on these different stories. I essentially went to anti-work and I filtered by top of this month, and I picked just a couple stories that I thought were kind of interesting or would yield an interesting reaction from you. So we're just going to dig right in and have a little fun. Yeah. So first post I found, this was posted by a user, Danky. And Danky wrote, the topic is, quote, "You should be working 12-hour days." And the post reads, "My best friend's mom got a new job at a tech company about 3-ish months ago. She does something with coding, not exactly sure. But yesterday, she received an email from the CEO stating that all employees are not working hard enough and that they need to be working from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. I thought this was insane to send to your employees. How are they supposed to do anything other than work? What about kids, or I don't know, eating and commuting? Absolutely bonkers. Is this normal? Is this even legal?"
So I believe this is plausible that a CEO sent this email out, especially in a tech space. And I'm envisioning that it's a tech startup possibly, or someone attempting to go public. Those are the two major kind of cornerstones in tech companies where they do need you to grind, and an expectation could be a 12-hour day. You're familiar, Megan, one of your companies went public. I worked at a company that went public as well. And I just remember that moment. In my work environment, it wasn't stated explicitly like you need to work 12 hours, but the behaviors and milestones and expectations and timelines, you're saying it without saying it. So is it legal? I mean, there's something called an AWS. So one could say it is legal. And for our listeners who don't know what an AWS, that's considered an alternate work schedule, where organizations will vote to implement 3 12-hour days. I think the caveat here is if someone was like expecting you to work 5 days, 12 hours a day, I think, yeah, it's legal if they're paying you overtime, double time, like paying you their appropriate premiums for the hours you're putting in, because businesses do have the right to say like schedules change or per business needs. So it is legal. But the question is, for this Reddit poster, it sounds like this issue isn't happening to you. So if the person who's doing the work is okay with it, then it's a mutual agreement. They're saying you have to work this time and this person is working it. If it doesn't align for your lifestyle or your boundaries, then have a conversation with whoever your manager is, or if you report to the CEO and say like, this doesn't work. Sorry, I have 2 kids. I have to pick them up from daycare. I'm a single mother. But this is a common thing in small businesses or startups that are looking to hit the glass ceiling, right? There's a transition. There's a small employee population there. So you're traditionally wearing like 10 hats. And oftentimes you do have to work 12 hours to do those various jobs. So I think this is really standard, unfortunately, that we see it in those type of industries. So I do believe this is plausible and true at the same time. And it is legal. And it's okay, because I want to remind everyone employment is at will and you have the right to walk away as well. And so I think oftentimes when, you know, an obligation changes, I won't say a contractual obligation because not employees are in an employment contract with their employer. But when those terms change, you have the right to ask yourself, like, do I want to continue with these new terms? And if the answer is no, then go. Megan, you're rubbing off on me.
I know. The solution is always to quit your job. Alternate question for you, Lakisha, because I think spending time in the startup space, I think sometimes CEOs, they get a little bug in their ear, you know, something like people aren't working hard enough or they're stressed, and, you know, we all know shit rolls downhill. Say you were the HR person and the CEO sends this email unprompted without talking to you first. How would you respond, and how would you counsel this person on how they could have been a better CEO?
Megan. And so I think the first step, I would have been shocked when I read the email. But
it's like, is this me too?
But I would have just stepped back. Traditionally, in small companies, HR and the CEO have a really close relationship. So some of whatever that CEO is feeling, that HR person has already been privy to, because they're traditionally in lockstep, right? When you're in a small startup, it's the HR leader, it's the CEO, and then it's the CFO, and it's a trifecta, and they're tight like a triangle. So 9 times out of 10, I would already know what those pressures are, but I would just go right into their office and have a conversation and say, like, let's talk about this, because this email is going to land flat, right? And the coaching I would really provide is like, can we give the why? Can we not communicate this via email? Like, this could have been a stand-up. You know, how do we set the stage about what we're trying to accomplish? And then getting clear about what those measures are, right? Like just sending an email, you're working 12-hour days. Okay, like what does that mean? Are we working 12-hour days until we go public and we're evaluated for our company? Are we working 12-hour days because it's the holidays and we need to get this tech equipment out? Like, let's get clear about what that is, why we're doing it, and what is the measurement to say that we're successful and that this 12-hour day will end. So that would really be my coaching. And then kind of bring him back, right, to say, hey, are there some other things we can do too? Because sometimes it's not always about the hours, right? Some people can put in hours and they yield the same result as working an 8-hour day. So kind of being a little more strategic. Is it just one work stream that needs to work 12 hours? Is it like inventory because we're not getting things out? Can we move staff to help them? Can we get some temps in? So really just thinking about it, because oftentimes what I know to be true is when people work overtime, they're not as productive. So you end up paying a premium and still not getting the result that you're looking for. So that would really be my coaching in this situation. Time out. Let's think about a plan before you send this inflammatory email and piss everyone off.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's so true. I think the back half of that especially is well, why? Why do we have to work 12? What else can we do? Because to your point, I know we've talked about this in other episodes, but I think the study is something around we can do about 90 minutes of deep work a day, and we can only do it for 3 to 4 times a day. So if you're pushing people to work 12 hours, you're not going to get good output for them. They're going to burn out. They're going to quit. So I think that's the other piece of this too, is clearly the CEO needed a Jiminy Cricket on their shoulder to say are you sure this is how you want to approach this? Are you sure this is the best way to communicate this information? So we do have an unfortunate update that was added to this post. And so we'll end it there because I'm not surprised. My best friend's mom and about a dozen other people were fired today with no warning. Gotta love our corporate overlords. But to me, it sounds like possibly an unsuccessful startup with a very not effective executive that probably shuttered or came close to it. So interesting tale from the internet. All right. So scenario 2, I actually love this one. I think there's a lot to pick apart in this one. I quit my job and then my employer texted my mom. So this person had a little preamble because they had another post that went a little viral in anti-work. I'm going to skip all that because it's not relevant. So we're just going to pick up about halfway through. It says, so I found a job that I personally think I will enjoy. So I have to turn in my shirts and my name tag. I decided to include a resignation letter for posterity. I went beyond I quit because I felt like that wasn't enough to leave on. I wanted them to know what the problem was, even if they wouldn't do anything about it. And so I left this letter, which was handwritten, and I've transcribed for you. I must say this person, their sentence structure is a little all over the place. So I'm going to read their letter right now, but it's a little goofy. To whom it may concern, effective immediately, I quit. While I have appreciated the opportunity to work here, it is of the opinion of myself and those whom I have worked with that management has become incompetent and derelict in their duties. At times, this dereliction has become vindictive. Personally, there are 2 things that led to this action. Unable to request a day off to attend an important appointment within the company allotted grace period, for one, and your unwillingness to give the father of my niece the hours he needs to feed his child. It is because of these reasons that I believe my views no longer reflect those of management and the company as a whole, and that I must immediately resign my position. Signature. After that, she sends my mother messages on Facebook about, quote, I had a lot of nerve, and, quote, I have a lot of growing up to do. Oh, my.
So this has a lot to unpack. So I don't know if I believe this. And then if I do believe it, it must be a family business, because the uncle came up about feeding the child and then Facebooking the mom. So if this story happened in a corporate setting, I think it's a lie. If it is a family-run small business, it could be plausible. But, geez Louise,
Well, let's start with the resignation letter. What do you think about the resignation letter?
I think it's goofy. It is just goofy. I mean, it is poorly constructed. And also, too, I think for our listeners, don't let the day you resign be the day everything goes up in flames. If there is something you're concerned about, say something before the last day, because essentially this resignation letter sounds like, oh, you and your coworkers are all pissed and they've riled you up so much that you've thrown your uniform and your badge and now you're resigning. And guess what? Now you're the one with no pay. So I think in work settings, it is easy for people to bitch about what's going wrong. And I do it and I've done it, but I do try to get to a resolution on the other side of it. Like, okay, you can vent. Okay, now what are we going to do about it? And then also, too, I've come to terms with, like, some shit isn't going to change, right? And so then I have to ask myself, like, is it worth me staying at the place where this shit isn't going to change? And the only way I can make that decision wisely is by having conversations. Speaking to my boss and saying, like, hey, that comment you made the other day, like, what did you mean by that? Because it offended me. Right. And then allowing my boss to say, oh, no, I didn't mean to offend you. You know, I'm so happy you're here, you know, but I didn't just put in my resignation notice and say, fuck you. You offended me. And now I'm quitting and I'm telling your boss and I'm telling everyone and you suck. No, like that's not being a mature citizen. Right. Like, I think we all have like our civil duty as professionals, and you know, that comes with having conversations, not just waiting for some letter and like, I'm going to lay it all on you. And by the way, stop making everyone else's problem your problem. Your uncle can't go feed his kid. What does that have to do with you? What does that have to do with you?
Yeah.
And
yeah, like it could bother you morally. And it's like, I generally don't want to work here because we're treated shitty, like that's fine. But it's kind of like, let your uncle fight his own battle. Yeah, I am a big, like, don't sink the battleship on your way out. I have been tempted. Like, yes, I think we all have. But fuck, people talk. Like, you just don't know. I have heard, like, stories of people I don't even know that quit with no notice, that, like, went out swinging, all that sort of stuff. And sadly, like, those things do follow you. I mean, can you quit with no notice? Absolutely. If it's like, if something really terrible happened and you're like, this company doesn't even deserve a 2-week notice, do it. We're at will. But I think given the context of like this sort of situation, like this person quit with no notice and then like sunk the battleship on the way out, while I'm like passively like enjoying the chaos of it, like if I were the person, like that sucks. Like I don't think it's a good thing on the employee's reputation or on the business. You know, it's just like, move on, let it go. I've always been a person of like, if you want to know more about why I decided to leave, I'd be happy to have a conversation. And again, like exit interviews are great for that. Yes, HR people do actually try to do something with those, by the way. I think a lot of people think it's just a pleasantry. It's not. We actually use that for information, for things we try to make better in most situations. But yeah, this just feels like a little like angry, petty. It is probably like a mom and pop small business. But I think petty. I think we picked on the employee enough, though. How about the boss messaging the mom on
That's why I don't believe it's true. Like, okay. Number one, going back to the employee just for a second. If you're leaving somewhere where who cares, right? Like, that's why I don't think you need to sink the ship while you're leaving, because who cares? You're moving on, you know? But fast forward, why would an employer reach out to your mom? Like, your mom cannot change your decision or force you to work, right? I don't know what, legal limits to work in other states are. In California, you can work at 15 and a half with a permit, but most organizations will do 16. But like, your parent cannot make you work. And by the way, if someone quits and you contact the mother, like, what are you going to do? Reinstate their employment? Like, that person doesn't want to work there, so they can't force them to come to work. So that it just doesn't make any sense to me. Unless, again, it's a family-owned business and they're like, I hired your son because you said he was a terrible kid and I gave him work and look what he did to me. But like, again, if it's a family-owned business, you would just pick up the phone and call, whoever the mom is, Johnny walked out today, but that's why I don't buy this one.
I have an embarrassing story, but I will still share it, where I had like a family, like a friend's like mom kind of adopt me for a short period of time. My mom moved to California when I was in high school, like in my senior year. And then my friend's mom kind of just like adopted me for the year, more or less. So I spent a lot of time at their house. I live with my dad, by the way. I wasn't like out on the streets. It was just my mom moved to California. And I had a job that had gone out a bit. I had a job. It was my third job. I had 3 jobs. And then surprisingly, 3 jobs in high school while you're trying to graduate. And you also have chronic migraines, bit too much. So I ended up quitting one of those jobs. And it was a sandwich wrap place. And I quit that job. But then very soon after, the job I really liked went out of business. So I ended up crawling back to this other job that I didn't like that much. But I wanted to pick up 2 jobs. So I can't even remember the context, but there was one day where the business owner was just like absolutely awful to me. And I went to my friend's house and I was crying because he was such an asshole. It was a husband and wife. So again, small family business. And they were just absolutely awful to me, absolutely awful to all of us. I felt I'd made I regretted so much going back, and I was crying, and I was like really like self-conscious about all of it and all this stuff. And then my friend's mom, who is like very Italian and very Brooklyn, was like, "Give me your phone. Give me your phone." And then she calls them and she's like, "I have this beautiful girl sitting here and you should see her. She's crying. She's not going to work for you no more. She's quitting effective today, and you can mail her final check because she's not going to put up with your bullshit anymore. She is done. You people are terrible to her and you don't deserve her. So you can mail her final check and she is done." And then she hangs up the phone. She hands me my phone. She's like, "There you go, sweetie. You don't work there no more." And I was like, "Mama Segreto." Why would you do that? But again, those are just like some of the small chaotic things that happen in a small business environment. But I did quit that job and I did never go back, and I did get my final check in the mail. So anyway, it was super funny. But yeah, I definitely hear you. There's more to that story. We'll move on to the next one. This one I think is interesting because I think this is something that actually happens quite a bit, especially like HR people. I think it's something we kind of struggle with. But and I do think the person is blaming HR, but it's probably not an HR thing here. My employer is refusing my doctor's note because I have a quote unquote pattern. Last Friday, I didn't go into work because I have chronic back pain. My doctor knows this, so he wrote me a note to excuse my absence. Today, I'm told that HR can refuse my note because I have a pre-existing pattern. A few weeks ago, I had a family emergency. I took off Tuesday to Friday. My aunt was dying, and I wanted to spend time with her and my family. I also took the following Friday off for her funeral. I believe this is the pattern they were talking about, my bereavement leave. I am also so done with this stupid company. I don't even know if they're allowed to do this legally. If anyone knows, please let me know. And so, can HR refuse your doctor's note because you have a problem? Or a pattern, sorry, because you have a pattern.
So, again, we don't have the whole story here. And what I can share is that my company, we don't take doctor's notes. Number one, we advise our managers not to get involved in a doctor's note. Reason being is because oftentimes there's information on a doctor's note that can share their disability, which could lead to discrimination based on someone's disability. So our goal is to separate church and state, right? Your manager doesn't need to know about your medical condition. We have a separate venue for that, which is employee health and safety, and you can work with them and give them your note to start the process for, any kind of leave protection. And that's not based on state. That's a federal thing. So if you have chronic back pain, I don't understand why you wouldn't be offered intermittent leave so that you can be protected to take the time off. But sometimes that's, people don't know what they should do for their employees and direct them. saying that you're not accepting the note because of the pattern, that seems weird to me. Someone could say, we're not excusing your absence. Just because you get a doctor's note doesn't mean an employer has to excuse you. But the risk on the other side is you should offer this person some protection. They have a medical condition that's been documented by a medical provider. And so if they have a pattern of calling out based on this medical condition, and you have not offered them their entitlement, now that's where the legalities come into place. Now, the bereavement is a separate and apart issue. Like, you should have bereavement time off, and and that shouldn't be counted against you as an attendance issue, because everyone has bereavement leave. You're entitled to that. And so I do think, oftentimes when we get into these attendance issues, there's miscommunications on why someone's out, or, do you call out properly, right? Like, do you wait till you have to be at work at 8 and you're like, oh, I'm not going to be in today, right? So I think there's a lot of elements here that would need to be impacted to weigh in and really have a meaningful answer for this person who has posted. But do I believe this is true? Absolutely. Thinking about the employee side, I think thinking about the employer side, oftentimes employees don't understand the impact when someone calls out. And so I think the employer side, it does get frustrating when you have a pattern of always calling out, because they're basing productivity or, goals or turnaround times based on having a certain amount of staff. And so when someone appears to be abusing that, they do get frustrated, right? Because they can't rely on you. And not only does it frustrate the manager, it also creates tension in the department. Oftentimes, coworkers come to HR or to that manager and say, what are you doing about Sally? She never comes to work and nothing has happened, right? So I think there's a bigger picture in this situation. But absolutely, an employer can say, no, I don't need your medical note. And absolutely, an employer can say, it's not excused, right? You didn't follow the proper call out procedure. Or guess what? You've now given me 10 medical notes, and every Monday, for some reason, your back hurts. Only on Mondays, right? And so that's what they're talking about in regards to a pattern. And also, your pattern could lead to performance issues. Maybe every Monday you have a project due and you have a meeting you're supposed to facilitate and you're magically never there. Well, yeah, there's a bigger problem.
It's like not going to school and your homework's due.
Right. Exactly. So I think there's components to this that we would have to unpack with whoever the person is. But I do think those are some key factors, right? And attendance is a hot topic for every organization, manager, and employee. But like, what I don't get, Megan, is like, how can people afford to live when they don't come to work?
Yeah. I think you narrowed in on it. I think the fact that they have to provide a doctor's note is very indicative of the culture, right? It's obviously a culture that is not, here's your time off, take it as you need it, like a positive intent driven culture. It's very much a like, oh, you were out, you need to prove it, and you need to tell us why. I think kind of the same thing with the bereavement, the fact that they would consider the bereavement like the same kind of leave as like someone taking medical. So I am kind of like team, even though there's not a lot of detail, I'm kind of like, there's enough in there in the nuance that I'm like, it's probably like just like not that great of a work environment. But I do, to your point, I have been in a situation where there was an employee that always took the day off, or like took some pretty sporadic days off. But when we looked at a calendar, it was like every time their football team lost, they were out the day before, they were the next day. You would think after they won, but it was after they lost. And we did end up kind of confronting the employee of like, we're not stupid. Like, you come in decked out in their regalia like almost every day, and like we've seen this pattern. So I think in that space you could kind of push on a pattern. But I think like one thing I've seen in like employee leave situations is just a lack of communication, where the employer has to like back off, right? If someone's ill and they need to get better, we need to let them get better. But then also, like, from the employee perspective, even if it's like, I'm going to be out and I don't know when I'm going to be back, but I will check in this date to give you an update. And even if the update is there's no update, like, that type of communication actually is really critical, because I think it shows that you're coming from a place of positive intent of like, my intention is to come back, but I need this time away. But I respect to what you said that, like, we as the employer kind of do need to know when you're going to come back. So I would say anybody navigating a leave situation, it is stressful and it sucks, and you kind of don't want to deal with your employer if you're dealing with your own medical stuff. But if you do value that work and you want to be able to come back to it, like, consistent communication is very helpful, especially for your HR person or your boss that's like, you know, advocating to like give you the time away to like get better. But yeah, I will say, again, I think there were like little nuggets here and there throughout this story that just kind of show it's maybe not the best environment. But I have seen this a lot where people are like, my boss thinks I take too much sick time, you know, things like that. I like your perspective of, you know, you shouldn't have to provide a doctor's note. It's like, if you're taking sick time, just take your sick time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is just a fun one to laugh about. The person posted, I just declined a commission-based job, and here's what they told me. And they screenshotted a picture of the email. And so the person basically sent the email saying, like, thanks so much for the offer, respectfully decline, and essentially said, like, compensation's not in line with what I'm looking for. And this person replied, wow, I'm a bit taken aback. I apologize for any confusion. It's a fact that everyone needs to pay their bills and support themselves. That's precisely why individuals aspire to pursue this profession. It has the potential to transform lives and alleviate financial burdens. When I began this role 8 years ago, I was starting from scratch, relocating from Vancouver with no prior experience. Despite that, I managed to financially support my entire family across Canada while also renting a place in Vancouver and covering all expenses, including tuition fees. This job offers remarkable stability, so I find it perplexing. It's essentially about putting in the work. My hope is that you recognize that everyone who enters this profession is in a similar position to yours. No one starts off with privileges. In my opinion, the decisions like these can be life-changing, shifting individuals from financial struggles to stability. It's disheartening that you don't share this perspective. Wishing you the best of luck. And then the poster went on to say, this is a commission-based job and the base pay was $300 a week.
Okay, so this is definitely valid. I see this as being plausible. And what has happened in this very moment is that someone allowed their emotions to get the best of them. When someone declines a position, you say thank you. If you want more context on why the salary isn't aligned, you can gather that information, because that may be helpful for you to take to your leadership team about reevaluating the compensation band for that position. But this is way too emotional, way too connected. Like, who cares what you can do, how you did it, and what your life story has been? I think oftentimes, and speaking from being in a recruiter position, which we've been in before, sometimes you can get invested in the candidate, right? And it's almost like being dumped, right? Like, oh, you don't want me? I'm not good enough for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, by the way, if we have any recruiters listening, what I've experienced anytime someone says no because of the pay, and you come back and you get them more, that person doesn't traditionally stay on long. Because even the more you got them is not really what they want. And so they're never really going to be happy. So on the front end, it's best to say, okay, thank you, gather more context. But, shedding your whole life story, look, do not get emotionally invested in these candidates, especially in this market today. Like, really good candidates, they're getting multiple offers. And so understand how you can better position your organization to be desirable. And sometimes you don't have the bankroll. So are there other things you can do to create a a desire for people to be more attracted to either your product you're selling, to the culture, to your benefits package, to, you know, their peers they'll be working with. Sometimes it's folding in, you know, different total rewards, you know, like a fertility offering or paying for college or just doing something creative that will attract them. But that email would make me run faster. I would be like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you.
Yeah, that was like I was like, bullet dodged. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's like as someone who currently recruits, I do get emotionally invested in people, and I do advocate for them, and it breaks my heart every decline I send, especially in this market. I try to be really thoughtful in my declines, and I try to be like really supportive and like, you're a great candidate. This just wasn't the one, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, this is totally like you can't take it personally if someone doesn't want the job. Like, you just can't. Like, it'll eat you alive. It'll drive you insane. It's a lot of time. This is like the whole thing we keep talking about is like, work is a contract, and you need a person, they need a job. But if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. And kind of shaming this person for not taking what you perceive as this like amazing opportunity. Like, what are you trying to accomplish here? Like, Are you saying, hoping they go, oh, never mind, I join, I accept? And, you know, it's like, that's obviously not the solution. And maybe it's like, I hope I taught them a valuable lesson today. And it's like, oh, that's not really your place to do that. It's not your fucking business. So I think poster, I think this was true also because it was screenshotted from email, which is harder to fake. And B, like, I definitely think poster dodged a bullet.
Psychotic.
And I think that this is psychotic to send an email like this. That was like the emotion. I was like, wow, this is psychotic. Like, let it go. Let it go. She said no.
And by the way, you cannot compare your financial posture to anyone else's. Like, great, it did all this stuff for you, but you have no idea what someone's up against in life. So to say like, this is great because you've been able to do A, B, and C does not apply to someone else, because we all have different financial obligations. So if I was a candidate, I would just be like, oh, thank you, guys. Next. I would delete and block.
Thank you for, I would have like responded something spicy. No. Like, thank you for affirming my decision was the right one. Deuces. Yeah. And especially like there was one line is like, nobody is born with privileges. I was like, that's absolutely not true. It's not even close to true.
Like, what world are you living in? And it's funny that you like have so much time to write these kind of emails to candidates who decline. Like, move on and find your next candidate.
Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah.
Best of luck. Good luck out there.
Oh, my God.
That's all it takes.
Ooh, say you're in your feelings without saying you're in your feelings. Lovely.
All right. So the next one. This is another screenshotted email. And it says, payroll will be delayed because the person is on vacation. And the email reads, hi, I hope you're having a great day. I just wanted to give you some important updates regarding payroll for the last week of April. Some of our office staff will be out of the office during this period, specifically April 22nd to April 30th. I know how important it is to get paid on time, so I wanted to let you know that there will be a slight delay in payroll for April 30th, 2024 will be processed May 1st. Processed May 1st. I want to emphasize that for a minute. You will receive your payment on Friday, May 3rd. If you have any resolved issues on April 30th, don't worry. We will resolve all issues before running payroll on May 1st.
Okay. So, number one, this is real. I envision it now. It's probably a small company, but not the employee's problem. And by the way,
not the employee's problem. Pay him on time.
And by the
fuck, you pay me.
Yeah. And by the way, why did you approve for everyone who runs payroll to fucking be out at the same time, bozo? Like, you know. And this is illegal. There are, you know, penalty pay for not getting your normal wages on time. Mm-hmm. And so that's, you know, something this is illegal. Now I know it's governed different in different states, so I'm speaking from a California lens, but at the end of the day, this is ridiculous. Number one, that they would even put this in writing and start it off with, I hope you're having a good day. After
I'm about to make it worse.
after they just slap you with some news like, oh, hope you don't. Number one, that's the last paycheck of the month. Like, that's rent.
That's rent. That was my thought. That's rent. That's rent money. You're not giving people their rent money on time.
And so then that comes with another fee, right? So this is fucking ridiculous. Like, I don't even know. Now,
payroll people, HR people, don't do this. Don't do this.
Oh my God. Like, this is crazy. And whoever like allowed this email to go out is nuts too. Like, they should be fired.
Yeah. My favorite part is like, I know how important it is to get paid on time. So I wanted to let you know that there will be a slight delay in payroll.
But we're not paying you.
You're literally emphasizing it's important to get paid on time. I know how important it is to pay you on time. I wanted to let you know we don't plan on doing that.
Oh my God.
Like, yeah, and like the cheeriness, like this is HR cringe. Like this is HR cringe in an email. Like the cheeriness of it, the like hyper, like it's way too wordy. It's way too verbose. Like, it's just like payroll will be delayed by 4 days. That should have been the email. And like, even still, it shouldn't have been because it's never acceptable. I did payroll for a chunk of my career. You do not fuck with people's pay.
Yeah.
You don't fuck with people's pay and you fucking pay them on time. It's not hard. So this is a big failing in this company. Like, if there's only one person that knows how to do payroll in your company, you gotta fucking teach somebody else how to do payroll.
Wow. This is unbelievable.
Yeah. And so if you are ever in a scenario like this, like look up whatever law it is in your state and just say, you must pay me on time. Like, it's like, because you have to write it on your labor law posters and all that sort of stuff. Like, you can't just not pay people when you're supposed to pay them. There are every state has laws around this. So just look them up and send them back to your employer and be like, absolutely not, pay me on time, figure it out. Yeah.
And I'm speechless that they will put this in writing. That's the part that gets me.
I know. So we're going to make it extra cheery. We're going to make it not make any sense. We're going to tell you that we're going to pay you late in writing. And then we're basically going to be like,
see you when I get back from vacation.
See you when I get back from Cabo. Like, come on.
Oh my God.
All right. Well, I have our last scenario here, and I wanted to put this one last because I think that this is a really, really interesting one and pretty relevant to a lot of the things happening out there in the world right now, especially in the tech world. I was told I was being laid off, but then they changed their mind. So a few weeks ago, the company I work for notified all 30 of our team that we were being laid off. About 2.5 weeks later, I was told by HR that they have changed their mind and they want to keep me on, but I am the only one of my team that they are keeping. I don't know how to feel about this. I'm devastated for the rest of my team, and I'm pissed off at the company for messing me around as I've already wasted time and have had interviews for other companies now. At the same time, it's obviously a massive weight off my shoulders too, and I can consider myself lucky as well. If this was you, what would you do? It's hard to feel motivated to work for this company if at a click of their fingers I could be gone. Am I right to feel conflicted and frustrated?
This is a good one. This is probably real. And there's probably a shitty HR team behind this riff. But my advice for this person would be, you're already interviewing, continue to interview, and I would weigh my options. If they were offering a generous severance package, I would decline them. Like, you're already in stages of interviewing. So use your money, move on. Because when someone is thinking about an elimination, it is profit driven. So if they had this switch up in the 10th hour, it's coming. It's just going to come a little later. So don't waste your time. Take your money and run and get a new job. Now, if for some reason you're not being offered a severance package at all because it's not a requirement, then I would encourage you to probably say, okay, like I'll stay and continue to interview. And once you get a new job, leave. Because this company wasn't thoughtful enough to really get clear about their plan before they made an announcement. So that tells me that this company is probably not the smartest cookie in the box. And so I would spare myself from any future agony by, again, taking your professional career in your own hands, right? They don't owe you, you don't owe them. So think smart and be wise and be strategic. It's a chess match, right? And oh, thank you so very much for wanting to keep me, right? And stay there. And then once you get your new offer, move on. But if they're offering you severance, I would take my money and run.
Yeah. I think another thing this person could do is if they decided they did want to stay and maybe they are in a niche field where they're concerned about getting something else, you can always say, like, I'll stay and this is what it'll cost you. Whether that's like you're going to negotiate an increase to make up for the extra work you're going to do to pick up for other people, or maybe it's a retention bonus. Say, I will stay for 6 months if you give me 10K. Options like that are out there. So, I think that this company really showed their hand and their ass by saying, never mind, we want to keep you. And so leverage that, because it can always be a negotiation. And if they say no, you say, okay, I'm going to remain part of the rift then, and you just, like you said, hopefully there's a severance. If not, what have you. So we've both been on the other side of these conversations. We've both been part of planning these sorts of things, which is always terrible. What do you think went wrong here?
A few things which I've dealt with. The organization being gun shy about really doing an elimination and sticking to it, whether it's brand, reputation, whether it's emotional leaders who get sidetracked on the vision of why we have to do something, or it could be a poor contract, right? Like maybe they were going to outsource this work and they realized that entity can't do it as quickly as they promised, or something went wrong in the background and they need to keep one of their assets to keep the work going until that contract's fulfilled. So it could be a number of things. But if there was a group of people and now they only need one person to do the job, it makes me believe that they're offloading that work somewhere else and they need to keep it steady state with one person. So that's what I believe is what happened. So it boils back down to poor planning, because I've done layoffs where we're moving work. And so what we do is, of course, a company you're contracting with is going to give you sweet nothings. Oh, we can do this in 30 days and we'll have it done. As a partner, you should advise operations to build in a bridge. So if someone says they can have it done in 30 days, you research worst case scenario. If worst case scenario is 90 days and you plan to eliminate your team, in 120 days. So then that way, this new company is going to be fully integrated. That the opportunity for anything to break has already been solved through that integration process, and there's no disruption to your organization or to your internal, external customers. And then to Megan's point, in those type of situations, you do offer a retention bonus for that population you're laying off, because that could dilute your plan if the whole team leaves before that integration happens. So that's how you phase those to proactively really think about the posture of your company as well as the story you're telling people, because this person is never going to feel stable in her position. Mm-hmm. Like you've ruined that.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think the decision to cut this group was made by people who didn't understand the work. And it wasn't until somebody else further down the line was like, no, wait, like you were saying, we need to retain somebody for the knowledge, for the transfer. We need to retain somebody just to do a key piece of this because nobody else can. Again, like super poor planning, and obviously not made from a place of like organizational stability, probably made from a place of fire sale. Like, we got to cut. Like, we need to get rid of people. And, I know that, I have my spicier opinions on how these sorts of decisions are made, but it definitely really seems like nobody took the time to really think about what work was being done, right? It was just like an impulsive, or not like impulsive, but a thought of like, this isn't critical, let's get rid of it. From another perspective of the story, I was like thinking about myself and like what I would do if I was like delivered a message to a person that they were getting laid off, and then like 2 weeks later, their boss came to me and said, just kidding, we want to keep Nancy. And I'm like, I want to say that I personally was be like, you can't have Nancy. Like, we've already told her she doesn't have a job here. Or I would start with, all right, well, what are we going to do to compensate for like the emotional turmoil we've put them through over the last 2.5 weeks, telling them their job was going away? I don't know. What do you think, Lakisha? What would you do?
Well, I had a similar situation, but it was a little bit different. So we riffed 20 people, and we communicated, everything was fine. But then there were 3 LOAs that happened in a similar service line. So we were like, shit, like, we can get travelers, but that's stupid, So we really technically only needed one of the impacted employees to stay because we could leverage per diem staff. And so the manager, talked to one of the employees who didn't already secure a job and said like, hey, would you like to stay on longer to cover a leave? And the person was interested in doing that. So I think there's all kind of levels to it. But if it was blatant, like a misfire, I would be like, dude, we're not clawing this back. Like, so, get on the phone with the vendor, have them come up with a plan. Like, maybe we're now billing the vendor for the staffing that we have to use because they didn't fulfill their agreement, right? But yeah. And by the way, like, what quality of work do you think you're going to get from a person who you're like, you're fired? Psych, we want you.
Just kidding.
Yeah. So it's not even going to be worth it, right? Because that person, you've now damaged that relationship. And also they no longer trust you, right? They're like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. They wanted to eliminate me. Now they need me. And so as I think we don't think about the human element of who we are and being people and having emotional responses. I would be like, fuck you. Even if I wasn't getting severance, I would just like, I better make cutbacks with unemployment. Because like, that just doesn't feel good. It's like, oh, you didn't care about me, but then now you need me, so now you care. It's just weird, right?
Yeah, definitely. I guess like my devil's advocate to my own point is there is this piece of me that feels like, well, the employee should be able to be part of the decision to stay or go. I also think it's really interesting that HR delivered the message instead of their manager. So that's probably something else I would do differently is like, all right, executive and manager that made this decision, you get to go tell them that we now have a spot for them. I'm not doing it because this is your fuck. I think maybe me be present, but like I do think that message, because I think that also shows like, yeah, companies don't always get it right. And I think if a manager or leader would be able to say to this person, like, this is what we didn't consider. We do think you're really valuable. We do think you'd be essential in this transition. Would you consider staying?
Yeah.
And I think it's like more from a place of we fucked up, we acknowledge it. We'd love for you to stay. Rather, HR meets with you and says, just kidding.
Yeah.
Your job. You get to keep your job.
Yeah.
I think like that's a very different situation.
Well, I think in any RIF or reduction in force or layoff, whatever your terminology is, it's not on HR to share that message. It's on us to do the paperwork, to say like, here are the details, here's your pay, here's what we're offering you, here are the options. It's on operations to articulate, look, this is what's happening, this is why, and this is when, right? And so if there was a clawback on an elimination, they would be clawing it back. And then we would be there to say your benefits would remain the same, your wages will remain the same, there will be no impact to your position as is. And so I do agree with you. This is, HR ain't got nothing to do with this.
Mm-hmm. If anything, is probably either they didn't have enough power to like make sure the right decisions were made the first time, or they were also just not knowing the depth of the work. But yeah, I thought this one was really interesting, but I would definitely echo, if you're in a scenario similar to this, like me personally, I think it'd be the best idea just to leave. I wouldn't stick around because clearly like these folks don't know what they're doing. Or to Lakisha's point, you say, yes, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to stay. And then you do what you need to do.
Right. Have a plan.
Because to Lakisha's point, like the clock could so be ticking on this person, right? They agree to stay. And then 6 months later, they could no longer have a job because of, whatever reason they felt it was necessary to eliminate the other 29 people. So yeah, I thought this one was really interesting. And that was our last one for today. What did you think of this one, Lakisha?
I think being in this space that we're in of HR and people, nothing really surprises me. Like, even though I shared that, I believe some of them were plausible, majority were plausible, and I believe I thought one wasn't factual. At the end of the day, we're all humans, and that's what I have to remind myself in the work I do. Like, people show up differently, right? People have prior experiences that have, tainted their lens on how they see the world or interactions. And so I guess at the end of the day, I hear stuff and I like have a knee-jerk reaction, and then I remind myself, like, why am I getting surprised? I've been in this industry for how long? Like, you cannot make this shit up, right? Like, you can't. And so it does humble me in some ways as well. And it gives me the opportunity to relate to people who say like HR, they suck. And it's true. Like, some of them really suck. Like, and this is a reminder that we're all humans, like whether you're HR, whether you're the operations manager, whether you're the frontline employee, whether you're the big D, the director, like we're all human, and we're not going to get it right 100% of the time. But like, have the conversation, and at the end of the day, like, make the best decision for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Protect you. Focus on you first. Mm-hmm. And if you like your job, amazing, wonderful. But if you don't, there's better jobs out there. Yeah, no, just quit. That's going to be on our first t-shirt, offline and unfiltered, # just quit. Well, if you have an interesting work story, maybe you've been in one of these scenarios before and you want to talk to two humans instead of complaining about it anonymously on the internet, we would love to hear from you. As always, our email address is stories@offlineandunfiltered.com. Lakisha, any takeaways or advice you'd love to leave your listeners with today before we wrap up here?
Yeah. First one, put yourself first. Only you know what's best for you. And so take stock of that when you are making these decisions of whether you're going to just quit or whether you want to go to the table and negotiate. Or if you want to just stay and say nothing, just make sure you're taking stock and evaluating what you need for yourself. Number two, it's fun to read these posts, but, getting advice on the internet can be dangerous. You don't know who's responding to that post.
Or from a podcast. No, I'm kidding.
And so I just want to ask everyone to be mindful of that. Oftentimes I see things online where people are quoting legislation or different things of that nature. And so just be cautious when you are soliciting feedback on the internet, because again, the same way we don't know who made these posts is the same way you don't know who's responding. So definitely be mindful of that. And if you are looking for legal advice, we're not attorneys, please go seek one. And then the third thing is like, have a conversation, right? Don't wait until you're running out the door and you want to go up in flames. Like, that is so silly. It's so immature. And also, too, it's not meaningful because it devalues the information you're trying to share for people to improve. They don't take it seriously because you're running out of the door. You're giving this feedback in a negative way. And there's no form for two-way communication, right? For someone to ask a follow-up question. As Megan mentioned earlier in exit interview, there can be a dialogue for whoever that party is collecting that information for them to get more context, which is always important for someone to act on anything. So I think those are my 3 tips.
Yeah, those are good ones, especially like, I mean, all of them are great, but also like careful on the internet. I love Reddit because of its anonymity, but I also, my joke is sometimes people lie on the internet to get reactions. Would you believe that? So always take internet advice with a grain of salt. And again, if you want to talk to 2 real human beings, we would love to talk to you. So reach out. Thanks again, Lakisha, for your insights today. I enjoyed preparing for this one. I thought it was pretty fun. And listeners, if you like this or like this kind of style of picking up smaller bits from the internet rather than a longer form episode, let us know. Send us an email. We'd love to hear your feedback. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. The views expressed on this show are based on our personal opinions and should not be taken as legal advice. Contact an attorney for that. Our theme music and sound was produced by Equilibrium. Our artwork and logo was created by Jillian Blanco. We are an independently run podcast. If you like our show, please rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to share your story or expertise, email us at stories@offlineandunfiltered.com. We can't wait to hear from you.